Hey, welcome to the Publish, Promote, Profit podcast with me, Rob Kosberg. Every week, I interview thought leaders and experts who have used a book to grow their income and their impact. So tune in weekly for these interviews so you can learn how to use your own best-selling book and go from hunting for clients and opportunities to instead being the hunted. All right. Hey, welcome everybody. Rob Kosberg here. Excited to be with you for another episode of our Publish, Promote, Profit podcast. I think you're really going to love the guest today. We've already spent some time talking, and Jeffrey Madoff is a great guy, founder of Madoff Productions based in New York City. They collaborate with ad agencies, public relations firms, as well as directly with clients like private equity firms, investment banks, to do commercials and branded content, live streaming events, that kind of thing. You have a really interesting background. You started as a fashion designer and was chosen as one of the top 10 designers in the United States. Very, very cool. And then switched to film and video production. I didn't tell you that, but I have some of that in my history, not my personal history, but like in my family lineage. And even my son is involved in that out in LA, which is pretty cool. Jeff's edited, directed award-winning commercials, documentaries, web content for Ralph Lauren, Victoria's Secret, Tiffany, Radio City, the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, Harvard, etc. And obviously, you're the best-selling author as well of a book, Creative Careers, Making a Living with Your Ideas. Very, very cool. So we're going to be talking about that as well as, your very, very interesting career in business. So, Jeff, thanks so much for being on. Great to have you on the podcast.
Well, thank you very much, Rob. And that guy you're going to be interviewing sounds very interesting. I can't wait to hear what he's got to say.
He does. I mean, it's going to be fun figuring out exactly what it is you're going to be focusing on next, because from working with private equity firms and Harvard, to being a award-winning fashion designer, you've certainly had an incredible career already. And who knows what the next thing is. Although I didn't even mention you have a play that is hitting in the next few weeks. Maybe we could start there. I mean, what tell us about that. Tell us about, what's behind that. It seems to be a bit of a diversion from what your current focus is, but of course you're in the arts and film, so it's not that much of a diversion. But what's tell us a little bit about how that originated.
Well, I have a fundamental belief, Rob, that everything you do, if you're paying attention, informs everything else that you do.
Okay.
And although it may seem like some kind of a pivot or whatever, it's really not. And when I was doing production, you mentioned Radio City, and I did a film for the 75th anniversary of Radio City Music Hall in the Rockettes.
Nice.
Yeah, it was very cool. And that's such a magnificent venue. And the executive producer for Radio City, after we did this, as part of the Christmas Spectacular, as a matter of fact.
Nice.
So you could see my film and then the manger scene. So it was, and actually underneath the hydraulics of the stage, which is incredible at Radio City, when I went down there and was given the tour as we were working there, there's camels and donkeys down there for the manger scene. It's just surreal, know. So I shared the stage with, I think, 3 camels and 2 donkeys. Nice. So it was, you'd have to go to Tijuana to get that kind of a stage lineup otherwise, kind of talent. But the executive producer and I just established a really good relationship. And he called me at one point after actually he had left Radio City. And he said, there's somebody I want you to meet. Have you ever heard of Lloyd Price? And I said, Mr. Personality? He said, yeah. And I said, well, I know his music, but I don't know anything about him.
Yeah.
And he said, well, and this is how so many things happen. They went to the same eye doctor.
Okay.
And they met in a waiting room and struck up conversations and became friends. It was just wild.
How cool.
So they wanted me to make a short documentary about Lloyd because they wanted to start promoting him. And Lloyd is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yep.
His first song back in 1952 was Lawdy Miss Claudie, which was the first song by a teenager and first rock and roll record that sold over 1 million copies. And it broke down the wall that was called Race Records. because nobody's prejudiced against green.
Right.
And it was making so much money and selling so much, nobody wanted to miss out on it. When I met Lloyd and researched him and did the documentary, I was so taken by his story, his charisma, his music, and just the history that he had lived through, that I said to him, I know I can capture your voice. I want to tell your story. And so I wrote the first few scenes and read them for him. And he liked what I did. And that started a relationship that grew into a very strong friendship. And I was just watching the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Awards, the induction ceremonies on HBO. And in memoriam, Lloyd was in there and they played Lawdy Miss Clawdy, his first song, while they showed his and a bunch of other pictures. And he died this past May.
Wow.
So the play, which opens in March after a year COVID delay, aside from being a great piece of entertainment, I'm biased, of course, I wrote it. But aside from that, it's also going to be telling the story of an unsung hero and establishing a legacy that a lot of people don't know about Lloyd, even if they're familiar with his music. He was an amazing person.
Wow.
So, from filmmaking and writing and teaching about creativity to putting together a play, a lot of the same dynamics and same protocols are in place.
Love it. This is obviously an expression of your creativity, and you express that in a lot of different ways. But is there a business angle or future business angle for you, with maybe doing more of this or maybe branching, more in the direction of Broadway and that sort of thing? Or is this just a passion project that because of your friendship and relationship with Lloyd, you wanted to tell the story?
All of the above.
Okay.
Somebody had said to me, so is this a commercial project or a passion project?
Yeah.
And I said, well, it's both. I'm passionate about it. You can't get involved in trying to write a play and produce it, which is what I'm doing, raising money for it. So, it's also an act of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And not be passionate about it. Otherwise, I think you're kind of soul dead because it takes so long. I mean, I'm like 6.5 years into this, and that's not uncommon at all for a play. And, I think that you constantly have to ask yourself and define it even before you start. Well, why do I want to do this?
Yeah.
And I think that discovering what your motivation is, if you have a true devotion to doing something, then, passion is a natural byproduct of it because you want to get it done.
Right.
If you say, I'm going to write and produce a play because I want to make a lot of money, you're delusional, because, that just doesn't happen very often. Right. It's the exceptions. It's not the rule that, you end up making a lot of money from a play. It's possible.
Yeah.
I hope to do it. But Rob, I'm ultimately, in whatever I do, seduced by ideas. And, so I want to involve myself in stuff that I'm excited to talk about, that I'm excited to do, that I look forward to working with the people that I'm working with and all of that. And that ultimately involves risk because you don't know if I don't know if this is going to pay off or not.
Right.
So there has to be other reasons. And I believe that in a lot of ways, it's easier to enrich your wallet than it is your soul. And I'm looking for that kind of enrichment where I get invited on shows like yours to talk about what I'm doing because I'm excited about it and hopefully make a good guest. And some of the things I say resonate with your audience.
Yeah.
But it's because I want to be doing it because I think the story is important. Right. It's about popular culture. It's about race relations. It's about music.
Right.
It's about all of these things that are important to me. And Lloyd was such an amazing person that to be able to tell his story and to have gained his trust so that he wanted me to tell his story was profoundly important. And yes, I do, of course, hope that it, resonates with a big audience and makes money.
Yeah.
Very much so. nobody writes a play, nobody writes a book, nobody makes a film that they don't want seen, heard, or read.
Sure.
And if you say, well, I'm just doing this for myself, it's bullshit.
Right.
You don't do that because it's just for you. You do it because you somehow want to engage an audience in what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I love what you're saying. You know, I talk to my clients a lot because many people come to us with passion projects and or they have a desire, they're doing something successfully, but they have a desire to move in a different direction. And that may be consulting or coaching or something where they feel like they can give back and teach. And there is this sweet spot, you know, of both personal fulfillment and commercial success, right? Because what I tell them, you know, most are not coming to me independently wealthy. So I'm letting them know, look, we have to make sure that this is commercially successful. Otherwise, you're going to have to go get a job and stop doing your passion, right? I mean, if this thing is your passion and it doesn't produce commercially, then unless you're independently wealthy, you still have to go and take care of yourself. You raised money. You mentioned before, this is an entrepreneurial venture. You had to raise money, which meant that you had to sell this idea and this concept to people, even though the risks are high, right? With any type of venture like this. So how important do you think, you know, you sat down with people to raise the money. What was it that allowed them to, you know, gave them the faith, the trust to write the check? You know what I mean? Like, what did they see, do you think, that allowed them the belief?
Well, I actually asked that question.
Okay, good.
You know, because it's a good learning process for me too, as I was out there, you know, pitching.
Yeah.
Now, I've been pitching, whether I was selling clothes when I was a designer, making films, writing a book, you know, all those things involve pitches.
Yeah.
You know, and one of the things for the entrepreneurs in your audience, it's, I think, really important is you can't be the only one in love with your idea. You know,
right.
You need to know that there are other people that are willing to pay for the product or the service that you're offering.
Right.
So, you know, it's great to have supportive parents and friends.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, that's great. Oh, I'd buy it. Yeah. Well, until somebody actually writes a check and actually purchases it, and it's people that don't know you, don't care about you, and, you know, but they like what you're doing, then you've got proof of concept. And, you know, then, of course, you try to replicate that as you grow your business and continue to sell. But to start it off in the first place, you need some kind of a proof that there's a there.
Yeah.
That you aren't just, you know, swatting at the wind.
Yeah.
So raising money for the play, I think what people connected to, and this is what I was told when I said, so I'm just curious, why are you investing? Because, you know, investing in a play is, in terms of solid investments, is a crappy investment.
Right.
You know, if you just look at the numbers.
Yeah. And
people connected to the enthusiasm that I had for the project. And I do have a history of getting things done.
That's good.
So it's not like I'm out of nowhere. You know, I've had a successful production business for 40 years. I've done stuff.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm somebody who's never did anything and all of a sudden wants to do it.
Right.
So I do have a background. I'm not at all known in the theater world. But, you know, the first monies that I got in were from friends who liked the idea and who gave me that initial kindling to start the fire that grew.
Yeah.
So that people were seeing the light of the project. And now I won't carry that metaphor any further.
Yeah.
But you know, that the enthusiasm grew as the enthusiastic group that was investing expanded and the money raised got higher.
Yeah.
And they all connected they thought, oh, this is a foolproof idea. It's that they felt, and I think this is really important for people to understand in business, they felt that I could execute.
Right.
Because ultimately, you don't invest in the idea. You invest in the person's ability to execute on the promise of that idea.
Yep, 100%.
So that's what's really important. So I had a certain history of being able to do that.
Yeah.
And, my enthusiasm and belief in the project, is also, I think, acted as a magnet. And then as you get other people involved, they have friends and associates that they want to bring in on it.
I'm so glad I asked that question, because that is gold. What you just gave the listeners is like, however brilliant someone thinks their idea is, and however brilliant it actually may be, right? People are ultimately writing you a check, investing with you, buying your thing because of the things you just shared. I mean, the three things were you, right? Your ability to deliver, your energy. I tell my sales team all the time that every sale is a transfer of energy. You're transferring your energy and your belief and your passion to this individual. And the social proof element of, once there's belief and there's momentum in something, somebody, that maybe wouldn't have invested with you in the early days now has a little bit more confidence because, Joe and Jane came in. Okay, I'm not going to be the only idiot here, right? Joe and Jane came in. They're pretty smart, right? I love that. That's gold right there, because the brilliance of the idea, you didn't even mention that, right? Of course you believe in it. Of course it's a great idea. But the brilliance of the idea, oftentimes without the elements that you just mentioned, doesn't go anywhere, right? It's just another great idea that wasn't executed on. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, you are correct. And by the way, I don't know how much of this background noise you're hearing, but it's good. It's New York City. It's never quiet out there. Yeah, I think that, that's why that old bromide, which is still around, which is ideas are a dime a dozen,
right,
is really true.
Yeah.
And because, again, smart investors invest in people they believe can execute on the idea.
Yeah.
It's not just that they have a good idea.
Yeah, the jockey, because not the horse, right?
That's right. That's right. And so it's really important to realize that.
Yeah.
The first day of class every semester, I'll say to my students, and they're all, in creative fields.
Yeah.
And I'll say to them, how many of you have been to a museum or a gallery and you've seen things and said, oh, I could have done that? And almost all of them raised their hand.
Sure.
And I said, so what's the difference between you and them?
Yeah.
And at first there's silence. And then I'll see somebody, sort of wake up and they'll say, they actually did it. I said, that's right.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
They actually did it. So until you execute on your ideas, until you can show that you can take it from here and put it out there in some way, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
It's just another unrealized idea. And if you are independently wealthy, or you have a family that'll fund anything you do, or a friend that'll fund it, that's different. In the real world where most of us live and don't have that kind of financial head start, so to speak, which, by the way, they still lose lots of money. Those businesses won't sustain.
Sure.
But in that real world, that ability to execute and commit yourself to it, and also to tell a story about it.
Yeah.
So, I've been telling you a story about this play. I've been telling you why I want to tell you that story, because it's about race. It's about the birth of rock and roll.
Yeah.
It's about the beginning of the youth movement. It's about a guy who was in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Well, if I said to you, this is a play that's going to cost this much to produce, what do you care?
Right.
But if I am telling you a story and you connect to that story and you want to know more, then I've got you.
Yeah.
Because what I've got then is that once upon a time story aspect that engages the listener. And at least I'll get a hearing. That doesn't mean they're going to invest. But let's take this to another business altogether. When you see a commercial for an iPhone, you're not told how many gigabytes of storage. You're not hearing about how fast the processor is. You're not hearing about the megapixels of the camera. You're not hearing any of that with Apple. What they do is they show you a happy user.
Right.
and they sell that experience, that user experience.
Yeah.
And they don't talk about the technology. I would argue that Apple is more of a marketing company than anything else.
I would agree.
And so that's another day-to-day example that maybe your listeners can visualize, because they'll realize, they don't talk about any of that stuff, do they? When you're looking at the ultimate driving machine winding through the mountains, by the way, a trip almost nobody ever takes.
Yeah. Right.
But you're hearing about that, and you see this story. You might attach to the aspiration of that, even though you'll never live that moment. But they don't tell you how many horsepower it is, how many miles to the gallon you're going to get. None of that, because people don't retain facts.
Right.
But they do remember how the experience makes them feel. And when I got people, circling back to the play, when I got people to come to the workshop that we did, and they saw it and they heard and felt the music and the emotion and people in the audience laughing and applauding and all of this kind of thing, that's when they wanted to invest. And
Nice.
You're absolutely right, by the way, that investing in a startup and a play as a startup, it's also a momentum business.
Yeah.
That when you start getting people, you can also then sell from the fact that you've gotten other people.
Yeah.
And you sort of build like that.
Yeah.
So that's another aspect to entrepreneurship, whether you're doing a play, creating a new app or some new service or whatever.
Yeah. The first couple are the hardest, right? Maybe the first one is the hardest. It is all you and your energy. I'm sure, because we've all started things, there's that doubt. There's that, I've got to get this going. I've got to get this giant boulder moving. And then once it begins moving, it becomes easier and easier. Never easy, perhaps, but certainly easier and easier to do it.
Well, I would say, though, there is a gap.
Yeah.
And that gap is initially, if you're, as they call it, the friends and family round, if those people help you out financially to get going, there's still a pretty good gap to bridge from people who don't know you, who don't care anything about you,
right?
But you want their money, to invest in your venture. So you've got to attract them another way, because any savvy investor knows who those initial investors are in most cases.
Yeah.
So you do have to put across a more compelling story to them. But I would also say that it's really smart to practice that pitch. Yeah. So that, when you're going to people, as you sort of move up in terms of the financial capabilities and resources that people have, you don't want to go into your first pitch meeting at the person who could write that check and do the whole thing. You want to have rehearsed your act.
Right. That's
good. You want to be prepared to speak about it in a way that's compelling, not fumbling your way through it.
Yeah.
Which you can do with friends and family.
Yeah.
Which you can't do with those others. And
it's interesting. I mean, we're applying this idea to raising money for a startup, and in this case, the venture, the Broadway venture, the play. But anytime somebody is selling something, a higher ticket item, there has to be a process. What I talk to my clients about is, you either have a process for people to buy, which includes a system of getting the best people through the funnel, the people that have the ability to pay, the people that have the desire to pay. But also there has to be a system for them to purchase, or you are going to follow that person's system of purchasing. In other words, the pitch, right? You have to have a way to come across with, for us, it's consultative selling, right? It's positioning yourself as the authority in the space, using your book, and helping people via asking questions like a doctor would, bringing them through this process. And if you don't have that, then you are going to be at the mercy of however they typically will buy, which means most won't. And so I love that. That's practicing your pitch in essence, right?
Yeah. And, if you had a part in a play, or if you were a player on a football team, It's all the same in the sense that you sort of run the plays, you run the lines.
Right.
You do your practice before you go in front of an audience.
Right.
That can make a difference.
Right.
Because there is no excuse for a lack of preparedness.
Mm.
You know that you're going to be pitching that person.
Yeah.
Get your information down. Get your pitch down.
Yeah.
Practice it. Say it out loud.
Yeah.
Go in there like you know what you're talking about.
Right.
And I think that is so important. Yeah. And anybody who thinks they can wing it is kidding themselves.
Yep.
Because again, once you get to that realm of savvy investors, they know immediately.
Right.
And so it's really important to do the preparation. There is no escaping the fact that hard work is what it takes to get anything done.
Yeah.
And maybe there's some rare exceptions to that rule, but they're incredibly rare. Right. I mean, you're an entrepreneur. Yeah. It's not easy.
No. And you're always fighting. You're always battling. You always have challenges. If you build it right, your business serves you. And I certainly sense that's the case with you. I'm thankful that it's the case with me. It doesn't mean that all things are always perfect, but when it's built right, you don't have to be a slave, nor should you, right? Be a slave to your creation. It should be certainly the other way around. So I want to shift gears and talk about your book a little bit, because your book seems to be like you made it clear in the beginning, all of these things work together. And your book would also seem to be a divergent path, creative careers, making a living with your ideas. The book's done really well.
I have a prop. Love it.
You can get it on Amazon. It's a bestseller there. It's got 100 plus 5-star reviews, which it's done very, very well. Congratulations for that.
Thank you.
Tell me, how does that fit in with everything else that you're doing? How does that fit in with Madoff Productions? How does it fit in with the play? Does it, or is it an expression of your creativity and service? What does that look like?
Well, I've been teaching a course at Parsons School of Design in New York.
Very cool.
Called Creative Careers, Making a Living with Your Ideas.
Okay. And well, there you go.
I'll tell you a funny story about that. I'll get to that in just a moment. The thing about the class is I bring in people every week. I have an incredible array of guests. Might be Michael Airred, who designed a 9/11 memorial.
Wow.
And then the next week, it might be Roy Wood Jr., the senior Black correspondent for The Daily Show.
Yeah.
And then I might have a best-selling author, a cognitive neuroscientist, Zaria Foreman, a wonderful painter, all on the surface, very, very different fields. But the unifying thread is that they make a living with their ideas. Mm. And I love teaching the class, because teaching is a great way to learn.
Yes.
And I love it. I research my guests thoroughly before I have them on. And, I just love it. I love it. And I love bringing that to the students. Many, many times people said to me, "Oh, you ought to do a book." And I had never really thought about it. Hmm. But what I did have the foresight to do is record all of my classes. Hmm. So I thought, well, I'm about the spread of ideas. I don't think that there's any ideas that should be secrets. I think that the world is a better place when good ideas are shared.
Yeah.
And I think the sharing of those ideas elevates all of us, because then you can build on top of something instead of everybody thinking they have to start from ground zero, so to speak.
Completely agree.
And so the first motivation was to basically spread the ideas and, get more traction, potentially, the book can, I know it has in cases, really helped people just get a sense of direction or make them think about things they hadn't thought about. I've had surprising reactions from people in terms of at the end of each chapter, there's questions that you have to reflect on what you've read and what you've heard some of my guests say and what resonates with you or what doesn't. And people have ended up with their own separate journal from those answers because they found there wasn't room on the page to write it.
Right.
And they started accumulating a journal, which was, I never thought that was going to happen.
Yeah.
And I was so thrilled that it had. So the primary goal was to get the ideas out there and spread good ideas, provoke thinking, critical thinking, which I think we have woefully too little of in our world at this point, and to get an idea exchange going on and get people, whether they are embarking on a career, thinking of starting a business, or stuck and trying to figure out they want to do something else. Because it's interesting if you're going to become a doctor or a dentist or an accountant or something, nobody says to you, well, what's your fallback position? But, if you're going to write a play, become an actor, do a painting, whatever, people will say, well, what's your fallback position?
Right.
Oh, I'll be a dentist. If I don't make it as an actor, I'm going to be a dentist. So I think that your fallback position is always your own savvy, your own survival skills, your own ability to adapt and pivot and all of those things.
Right.
And so I think the book helps people do those kinds of things. It is not, and I feel it's important for me to draw this distinction, it is not a prescriptive book. I don't believe in those. I don't believe that there's the 7 highly effective steps you can take. And, because that's what I call the myth of replication.
Right.
You can't replicate anybody else's circumstances,
right,
anybody else's context, anybody else's knowledge. You can do best practices, which is be prepared, work hard, show up, all those things.
Right.
But everybody's dealing with different things from a different knowledge base and everything else. But it's, there's a benefit that probably ties into what you do is, as a result of the book, it generates speaking engagements. I hope it generates another book. But I didn't do that to notarize myself as an expert. If people, as a result of reading it, find what I have to say attractive and would like me to speak at a conference or whatever the hell, that's cool. And that's happened. But that wasn't my primary goal. My primary goal is like what we've been doing, discussing ideas and how you do stuff and all of that.
Right. Whether it was your primary goal or not, it's almost impossible to write a good book and that not happen. Right.
And the key is good book.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I mean, if you have great ideas, and you really are an expert in your field, and you clearly are, and have expressed it in a number of different ways, right? As an instructor, as a doer of the thing, and you write about your knowledge base and you publish it. Now, obviously, you keep it secret, not tell anybody about it. But if you publish it and get it into the world, it's impossible not to be seen as anything but an expert. And you can grow it from there. If you want to do another book, certainly. Why wouldn't we want to hear more of an expert's ideas? So I'm so glad. I mean, tell me about some of the speaking engagements. You're obviously, you do a lot of speaking because you teach every single week, but like what kind of surprising engagements may have gotten from the book, or maybe they're not surprising, maybe they're expected, but I'd love to hear about that.
Well, it's, I never know what to expect.
Right.
And you never know who, like in this case, who's listening to this podcast.
Sure.
And, there are people that listen to podcasts like this happened, where they wanted me to give a speech on entrepreneurship and with the dean of the School of Entrepreneurism at Tampa State, Florida.
How
okay.
Cool.
So, yeah, it was neat. And then somebody else who actually read the book was on the board of a foundation, and I got a grant for the book. And the grant ended up getting, I can't remember how many copies. I think it was 1,000 copies of the book, 1,000 copies of the book.
Wow.
In the hands of racially and gender diverse audiences who belong to entrepreneurship groups.
Wow. Fantastic. And
that was in California, Illinois, and New York and Texas.
Yeah.
And so I never knew that was I could have never even anticipated that. And so I get this grant.
Yeah.
And
there are 1,000 books right there in the hands of the right
that's
audience. Right. Love it.
Exactly right. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. Well done. Jeff, love it. Love what you do. Very, very intriguing. I am now vested in this play, so I need to know in the future how it does and what happens. So I'm going to be following along. with it. Tell us, where can people learn a little bit more? Where's the best place to send them? Obviously, they can get your book on Amazon and various places, but where can they learn more about you, or where can we send them?
Well, they can go to LinkedIn.
Okay.
Look me up, and they will see 3 times a week there are clips that are of the various guests that I have in my class. And so you get these little kind of knowledge bites.
Love that.
Things that might entertain, provoke, bring about new ideas, tactics, whatever.
Yeah.
They can go to my Instagram account for Creative Careers. It's at a Creative Career, which also has quotes from my guesting class.
Great.
Or they can go to creativecareer.com.
Okay.
And that's got longer clips from the guests and things like that. I have to redo that website, by the way. And madoffproductions.com, where they can see my video work and that sort of a thing. So I'd say any of those areas are good places to see what I do and to connect with what I'm doing. Probably LinkedIn would be the best for that. And the play opens. We start performances on March 2nd at People's Light Theater in Malvern, Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia. We run through the 27th.
Yeah.
And, that's just really exciting. I mean, I'm going to be moving to Malvern for 5 weeks.
Wow.
I haven't been away from home 5 weeks straight, and I don't even remember.
Wow.
So that'll either, strengthen or ruin my marriage. We'll see what happens with that.
You guys may do better than ever.
Well, they say absence makes the heart grow fonder.
It does.
Or out of sight, out of mind. Who knows?
That's good.
I don't know which one it is. But fortunately, my wife, Margaret, is very supportive of what I do, and she understands what it is.
Yeah. But
I've never, been away working on a project like that for that long.
Yeah, 5 weeks.
And it's kind of interesting
until
we open. Then I won't be there as often after we open. But yeah, and by the way, I think it's always important to have things to look forward to. And, looking forward to the play opening and, looking forward to the possibility of another book, looking forward to the next semester, looking forward, like I was today, to doing your podcast. That's fun to just have things to be excited about and looking forward to.
Yeah, great life advice. I was given that probably 30 years ago. And that almost word for word, always try to have something in your day that you're excited about and looking forward to. And I've always thought about that. That's a great way to end. That's a good bit of life and career advice to give there. So, Jeff, wow, really fun to have you on. Really intriguing. Learned a lot, and thanks for being part of the podcast.
Well, thank you, Rob. I really enjoyed being on and enjoyed the conversation. I didn't feel like I was being interviewed. I felt like I was talking to a friend.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Thank you, my friend.